Mr. Ramanamurthy. Mr. Ramanamurthy.
Sir.
Sir, good evening.
Good evening.
You can start the session. And
Okay,
my dear learners, we are everyday sessions. We are uploading in our RC Visakhapatnam YouTube channel. These 3 day sessions already uploaded in our RC Visakhapatnam YouTube channel. If anyone want to revisit or listen again the lecture, you can subscribe the RC Visakhapatnam YouTube channel and get that video. Mr. Ramanamurthy, please go ahead with your session.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Within 2 minutes, I will start, sir. Good evening, everyone. I hope all you are visible this document, I think. So, today, as a part of our program, we are going with the detailed discussion with regarding to the World Trade Organization and TRIPS. So, before this, how the establishment of World Trade Organization and TRIPS plays a crucial role. Basically, at the end of the Second World War, it led to the establishment of several organizations. One of that is United Nations Organization. It was established exclusively for the maintenance of international peace and security. So, along with this United Nations Organization, 3 more other international conventions also to establish the international economic institutions also proposed. Out of that, one is International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the second one is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It is popularly known as World Bank. And the third one is International Trade Organization. Out of 3, both IMF and World Bank, these both were established based on the Bretton Woods Conference 1944. But this International Trade Organization was not materialized. It was not established because so many countries refused to participate in it. So they don't need to establish an international organization which would facilitate, bring down the tariffs. So out of this IMF and World Bank, what they specifically focus is the International Monetary Fund. It gives short and medium term loans to the countries who are facing the BOP crisis, balance of payment crisis. But the World Bank, so World Bank is it also provides financial and technical assistance, but this exclusively provides assistance to the development of their any big projects or programs. For example, if you want to construct a big dam, then you can go and ask money. You can take loan from that World Bank. But this was not possible in the IMF. IMF is when the country is ready to face the balance of payment crisis, then only they will give short and middle term loans. This is the basic difference between IMF and IBRD. So, at the 1944, due to non-materialization of the International Trade Organization, but the international community wants to deal with some agreement want to make which deals with the tariffs. So, for this purpose, they a provisional agreement was drafted in 1948 to deal with the trade and tariff at a global level. This later in 1986 in Uruguay round, it is also known as the eighth round of negotiation. So this eighth round of negotiation included even the IPR, investment and services, also in the tariff section. The decade of 1980s. So this after 6 years of continuous negotiations, the Uruguay round came into force in 1994. So that is the establishment of World Trade Organization. So in the decade of 1980s, there is a lot of technology was emerging. Technological innovations become highly sophisticated. So the need to evolve a stronger intellectual property regime thus was favored by the developed countries. So technology was regarded as a dominant engine for economic growth. Okay, so the multinational corporations, majorly who are located in the developed world, they are encouraging this technology dominance. So the developed countries and the international agencies projected intellectual property protection as a major factor in the growth of the world trade and made it an important item of decision under this GATT's Uruguay round of negotiation. So this Uruguay round, finally the Uruguay round was concluded in 1944 with the signing of a final act in Marrakech, Morocco. So this led to the establishment of a permanent institution with regarding to trade, that is World Trade Organization. So before that there is a GATT, it is a provisional agreement, not a final one. But this World Trade Organization is a permanent institution. So the World Trade Organization, also regarded as the primary international organization dealing with the global rules of trade between the nations. So all the members of the World Trade Organization are subjected to provide a periodic review of their trade policies to ensure transparency within the World Trade Organization agreement. Currently, there are 164 countries were there in the members. It is also accounted for 98% of the global trade. So, what are the features of World Trade Organization? So, the concern of World Trade Organization is the trade between the nations. So, it always strives to develop universally agreed rules relating to the global trade. So, first feature is it wants to develop a universally agreed global trade rules. And second one, it stands for liberalization of trade and serves as a forum where global trade agreements are negotiated and trade disputes between member nations are resolved and settled also. That means the dispute resolution system also there in this permanent institution. The third feature is it provides basic legal framework for its member countries to conduct the international trade and commerce. So the member countries have obligation to implement these agreements through their national legislations and trade policies. And the next feature is it has an effective dispute resolution system. So which is meant for inspire confidence among the members about a fair mechanism and neutral procedures to ensure speedy resolution of disputes. So the objectives of the World Trade Organization. What are the objectives? The objectives of the World Trade Organization is to enable a free flow of global trade without undesirable side effects. Number one. Number two, to allow the governments to meet social and environmental objectives. And the third one, to establish a transparent rule-based system for global trade where everyone is to abide all the agreed rules. So the World Trade Organization has an effective dispute resolution system which is meant to inspire the confidence among the members. So what is the difference between GATT and the World Trade Organization? So GATT was a provisional general agreement. It was concluded in 1948 and it was continued till 1995. Where the successor World Trade Organization is a permanent institution. It was established in 1995. So GATT deals with the trade in goods only, but World Trade Organization agreements, it covers trade in goods, trade in services, trade in intellectual property and investment also. So the GATT, it was an agreement, it was not an organization. It was a series of negotiations that created rules, but it has lacked a formal institutional framework. But in the case of World Trade Organization, it is a formal international organization with a strong institutional framework. So it has also legal standing, okay, with a secretariat in Geneva also. But in the case of dispute resolution, so GATT requires consensus of the members. But whereas in World Trade Organization, the structured dispute settlement mechanism also there. The structured dispute settlement is binding resolutions they will give to the trade disputes. So with regarding to membership, GATT has only 123 members, but World Trade Organization has 164 member countries. So basically it was all talks about what is the difference between GATT and World Trade Organization. Basically GATT is not a permanent institution, it is a provisional agreement. World Trade Organization a permanent institution. So the structured mechanism is there. GATT, there is no structured mechanism. What are the trading principles under the World Trade Organization? So the trading principles for the effective functioning of multilateral trading system, some basic principles are adopted by this World Trade Organization. So these principles are also within the GATT 1948 framework. So they are remodified. So the first principle is the most favored nation treatment. The most favored nation treatment. So what is the most favored nation treatment? So the most favored treatment means non-discrimination. Okay, so that this most favored nation treatment ensures non-discriminatory trade practices among its member countries. So what is this means? Under this most favored nation treatment, a member country must provide the same favorable trade terms to all the World Trade Organization members that it provides to any one member. So, if a country grants a special trade advantage to World Trade Organization member, it must extend to the same advantage to the all the remaining members who are part of the World Trade Organization. So this, it helps to create, or it favors to create a stable and predictable trading environment, because the most favored nation treatment, it benefits all World Trade Organization members to open their competitive markets. So this most favored nation treatment, the clause was normally included in the bilateral treaties concluded during the 18th and 19th centuries, particularly through the form of friendship, commerce, and navigation treaties. These are the old phenomena where date back to the principle of most favored nation treatment, because prominently in the agreements for all the three main reasons of trade handled by the World Trade Organization with regarding to that goods, services, and intellectual property rights. Exceptions to the most favored nation treatment. So, the first exception is a group of countries can enter into a free trade agreement in respect of goods that are traded within the group only. That means if out of the 164 member countries, if 10 countries formed as a group, in that group, if they want to give most favored nation treatment to one against others, then it is exception to the most favored nation treatment. It was allowed through the World Trade Organization. Second one, a country can give special access to its markets to developing countries also. And third one is, a country can raise barrier against goods from the special countries on consideration of unfair trade practices. But these all exceptions are permitted only under the strict conditions only. So, for example, if you are the part of the SAARC organization, then if you want to provide a special most favored nation treatment to any other country of this SAARC group only. So basically, how many members are there in the SAARC group? That is 8. MBBS, Spain, Maldives, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and Nepal. So these are all 8 countries are the members of the SAARC. So if India wants to give any most favored nation treatment to the Sri Lanka, then it is exception given under this treatment. India granted most favored nation treatment to the Pakistan in 1996. But Pakistan doesn't give its most favored nation treatment. In 2016, we revoked that most favored nation treatment with Pakistan also. So these are the exceptions to the most favored nation principle, where if one member country give some leverages to the other member country, then that member country has to give all that type of leverages to the other countries, except these three principles in these three cases. The second trading principle is national treatment. So national treatment, it means treating foreigners and locals equally by all the members of the World Trade Organization. So what that means is all World Trade Organization members are bound to give equal treatment to imported goods and locally produced goods, foreign services and domestic services, foreign and local trademarks, copyrights, patent designs, etc. These all should be give equal treatment. So this national treatment principle ensures foreign goods, services, and intellectual property rights, these are treated no less favorable than the domestic ones once they have entered to the member countries market. The foreign goods should not face additional taxes, regulations, or restrictions to that not apply to local or services. The national treatment principle apply after a product or service has entered the market. That is, a country can apply tariff or import duties at the border, but once a foreign product crosses the border, it must be treated as equal to the domestic products. For example, if a country imposes 10% sales tax on domestic cars, it must apply the same 10% tax on imported cars in India also. But at the time of border, you can make some exceptions. That is, the exception is it does not require countries to extend equal treatment in government procurement. So by allowing countries to favor domestic suppliers in this area. So if you want to import in the case of domestic government purpose, or if you are imposing for the others purpose, then you can make some distinction between the imposition or treatment. And second exception is certain measures may be exempt for the reason of health, safety, or environmental protection, as long as they are not applied in the discriminatory way of favor domestic goods over foreign goods. So, for example, if you are purchasing some medicine, health related goods or health related services from the foreign, then treating with the domestic differently, it is also acceptable through this national treatment exception under the World Trade Organization. Third one is free trade. So countries are known to raise barriers to impede free flow of the trade. So the imposing custom duties, selectively restricting quotas of import of various items. So banning of imports altogether are some of the obvious barriers. So there may be other measures which may not be so obvious, but which would still have the same effect. For example, subsidies, red tape, artificially propped up exchange rates. Exchange for free trade, the barriers have to be removed or lowered through negotiations. So the World Trade Organization agreements encourages progressive liberalization. Next, the third trading principle is, fourth trading principle is predictability. Predictability. So predictability, the economic development of a country requires foreign capital technologies, and expertise. So, foreign investments are drawn if there is a promise of stability and the policy environment which is predictable. So, the multilateral trading system under the World Trade Organization strives to create stability and predictability in the business environment through negotiations that can create binding commitments on the part of the members. So the market will be open accessed. Next principle is transparency. So the member countries, the transparency, the trade rules and government policy goes along with it to inspire confidence in trading partners. So the members must publish their trade regulations, tariffs and practices and notify the World Trade Organization of any changes. So this World Trade Organization has a trade policy review mechanism also. What this trade policy review mechanism does is it keeps national trade policies under regular surveillance. The next principle is fair competition. The fair competition principle, where the World Trade Organization encourages fair competition in free trade. In some circumstances, where trading practice of a country are proven to be unfair, as in the case of dumping and subsidies, the World Trade Organization rules permit rising of custom duty and other forms of protection also. So, several World Trade Organization agreements provide for conditions of fair competition to prevail, for example, in agriculture, services, intellectual property, and government procurement also. So the next one is development and reforms. So all the realities of the situations in the developing countries only. So the World Trade Organization agreements provide for special assistance and trade concessions to so many countries. So to develop countries and countries in transition to make economics, they have been gained additional time to comply with the requirements of the World Trade Organization agreement and join the mainstream. So the developed countries have opened their markets to export from legal development countries, allowing duty-free, quota-free imports. The next one is World Trade Organization agreements. So, World Trade Organization agreements mainly covers three broad areas. So, World Trade Organization is a system based on rules. So, these rules are the agreements which members of the World Trade Organization has arrived after detailed negotiation. So, World Trade Agreement has covered the three main areas, namely general agreement on trade and tariff related to or pertains to goods. So general agreement on trade in services and the general agreement on trade related aspect of intellectual property rights, TRIPS. It exclusively deals with intellectual property rights. So all the members of World Trade Organization have to abide by these agreements. So the agreements were arrived at after a detailed negotiation among government and participated countries. So they laid down the principle of liberalization and the exceptions has to binding commitments of the individual countries with regard to the lowering of custom duties and the trade barriers, and opening their markets to the services from other countries also. So they also set out a procedure for settlement of disputes. They require governments to ensure transparency in trade policies and notify that World Trade Organization about the laws in force and measures being taken to implement the agreements. So the World Trade Organization Secretariat keeps a watch and submits a regular report to member countries on their respective trade policies. So under the GATT agreement, the additional agreement basically it deals with first one, agriculture. The various sectors, the GATT agreement which deals. The sectors are agreement sector, textile and clothing sector, health regulations for farm products. It is also called sanitary and uh, phytosanitary measures agreement (SPS). And another agreement is product standard agreement. This is also called technical barriers on trade agreements (TBT). And other agreements regarding to investment measures, anti-dumping measures, custom valuation methods, pre-shipment inspection, rules of origin, import of licensing, subsidies and counter measures, safeguards. These are all the agreements which was covered by the GATT. Under the GATT, there are annexed dealings with regarding to services. There is also having agreements. So that is first one is movement of natural person. Second one is air transportation. Third one is financial service. Fourth one is shipping. Fifth one is telecommunication. But the TRIPS has no additional agreements and annexes also. These the agreement of the SPS, the health regulation for farm product, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, the medicine measures, it allows countries to set their own standards about farm products, but they have to be based on the science so that food safety regulations do not become an excuse to protect a domestic product. So the TBT, the technical barrier to trade agreement, this TBT agreement tries to ensure technical standards and regulations which are not made as an excuse to create unnecessary barriers to trade. So the World Trade Organization agreement on textile and clothing, it took over the multi-fiber agreement since 1995. So this sector will be fully integrated into the GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, by January 1st, 2005. So the GATT deals with services. So the service sector has been the fastest growing in the global economy. It accounts for 60% of the global output and 30% of the global employment and 20% of global trade. So this general agreement on trade related services, general agreement on tariff related services, does not question a government's right to bring in regulation to achieve its policy objectives or to set levels of quality, safety, or precise impartiality, ensuring that the regulation do not discriminate between nationals and foreigners. With regarding TRIPS agreement, the TRIPS agreement, it brings the protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights under the common international rules. It lays down the minimum level of protection of intellectual property irrespective of the origin of the country. So, the TRIPS agreement recognizes 7 types of intellectual property rights. Number 1 is copyright and related rights. Number 2 is trademark, including service marks. Number 3, geographical indications. Number 4, industrial designs. Number 5, patents. Number 6, layout designs of integrated circuits and butler. So the TRIPS agreement, it has 5 broad issues with it. So first one is basic principle of the trading system and other intellectual property prejudice. So the 5 broad issues are there. The first issue is basic principles of the trading system and other international intellectual property systems. So these 3 basic principles, national treatment, most favored nation treatment, and the IP protection should contribute to the technical innovation of users, the users of transfer of technology. It must be both the creator and the society. The second issue is adequate protection to the intellectual property rights. So, by enacting the agreements provide for the common ground to protect intellectual property rights, and the registration is required to patents industrial designs, integrated circuit designs, geographical indications, etc. to him. And third one is the registration is not required to copyright and the trade secrets. So these are the some provisions which were in TRIPS agreement. It is also considered enforcement of TRIPS, enforcement of IPRs through using these TRIPS. Each country has to insurance that IPRs can be IPRs can be enforced under its domestic laws that infringes attracts through the penalties that deter further violence, that the legal process is fair, just, and equitable, not unnecessary, complicated, and costly, and does hero not need to do. The World Trade Organization agreements, these came into force on 1st January 1995. So the developed countries had to bring their domestic laws in conformity with this TRIPS within 1 year, and the developing countries under the economics making a transition to the market economy, so they have 5 years to do, and the least developed countries had 11 years to do. While implementing the TRIPS provisions by the development countries, they faced difficulties. To serve these difficulties, Doha Development Agenda (DDA) was launched by the World Trade Organization in 2001 in Qatar Summit, Doha Summit. Doha is in Qatar. So the Doha Agenda, or the Doha Development Agenda, was focused on promoting development and addressing issues facing developing countries in global trade. So, what are the key provisions in the Doha Agenda? The members of the World Trade Organization community added to launch newly negotiations at the fourth ministerial conference in Doha in 2001. So, the issues under negotiations were conferred with the implementation of the present agreements and a few new ones. So, the Doha Declaration Agenda implementation relation issues. So, key objectives are lowering the trade barrier. Second, in agriculture, regular subsidies will be provided. Third point, prioritizing in the field of access to markets and fairer trade conditions. And fourth one, with regard to the intellectual property rights, balancing protections with easy to medicines, particularly in public health services like HIV/AIDS. So, one of the other key objectives is integrating environmental sustainability into trade policies. Due to the subsidies in agriculture sector and tariff resolution in developing countries, the developed countries were not accepted. So the Doha round has not yet reached a comprehensive conclusion. So what is the structure of World Trade Organization? Basically, the World Trade Organization has 4 levels of the structure. So in the first level, it is a ministerial. In the first level, in the World Trade Organization, all the major decisions are taken tangible. So the all World Trade Organization, all the major decisions are taken through the consensus by the members together usually. This is the first stage, there is a consensus. And the second stage, to look at the day-to-day affairs. So 3 bodies are established. The General Council, the Dispute Settlement Body, and the Trade Policy Review Body. So the first one, so the Ministerial Conference is the policy making body of the World Trade Organization. So this General Council could be regarded as the executive organ of the World Trade Organization. So the General Council also sits as the dispute settlement body to implement the roots of the panel and appellate body, and also sits at as a trade policy review body to review the trade policy of member countries. This was done in the second stage. In the third level, there are council for each broad area of trade, that is goods, services, and intellectual property rights. So these all the councils for each broad area of the trade, goods, services, intellectual property rights. So they are the Council for Trade in Goods, the Council for Trade in Services, and the Council for TRIPS Agreement. So the members of World Trade Organization are the members of all these countries. So at the 4th level, what they done is, at the subsidiary bodies of higher level conclusions, so at the 4th level, all the subsidiary bodies of the higher level councils are established. So that is the committees dealing with market access, agriculture, anti-dumping practices. So these are all the 4th level they are established. Though the decisions are made through consensus, there is a provision for voting on the basis of one country, one vote to decide on an issue. When the consensus is not possible, the decisions are taken according to the some rules. That is, number 1, for adopting an interpretation of any of the multilateral trade agreements, a majority of 3/4 of World Trade Organization members is needed. That means 3/4 they requires for the adoption of the interpretation of a multilateral trade agreement. The second, for the ministerial conference, through a majority of 3/4 can waive an obligation imposed on a member under a multilateral agreement. If in a multilateral agreement you made that you imposed an obligation for one particular member, so in the ministerial conference, by taking 2/3 majority, 3/4, 3/4 majority, you can waive that obligation also. And the third one, amendment to the provisions of a multilateral agreement can be adopted if approved by all the members or by a 2/3 majority, depending on the nature of the provision. But the amendment is applicable only to those members who accept them. So if you want to make any amendment procedure, for the amendment procedure, for that provisions, if you want to add, with the consensus of all the members also add, otherwise 2/3 majority they require. If 2/3 majority they given, in that case, those who are accepting that amendment will be applicable to only those countries, those members. And the fourth one, a decision to admit a new member requires a 2/3 majority in the ministerial conference or in the general council in between the conferences. So if you want to add a new member into the World Trade Organization, then you need to 2/3 majority required in the ministerial conference. So in the World Trade Organization structure, there is a secretariat is there, World Trade Organization Secretariat. So the World Trade Organization Secretariat, basically the secretariat is always in the headquarters. The headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. So this secretariat is headed by the Director General. He is supported with the 3 other Deputy Director Generals. So this secretariat has 18 divisions. This secretariat has 18 divisions. One is Administration and General Service Division. Basically, it talks about budget, finance, and human resource. And the second one is with regarding to information domain. Third one is language services and documentation division. Fourth one is economic research and statistic division. Fifth one is external relation division. Sixth one is accession division, that is through the negotiations to join World Trade Organization. Seventh one is information and media relation division. Eighth one is legal affairs division. Ninth one is rules division. It deals with anti-dumping, subsidies, safeguards, civil aircraft, state trading. These are all rules were governed with this rules division. And 10th one is market access division. 11th one is trade and environment division. 12th one is trade policies review division. 13th one is council and trade negotiation committee division. The 14th one is intellectual property division. The 15th one is trade and finance division. The 16th one is agriculture and commodities division. And the 17th one is textile division. And the 18th is development division. So besides these all 18 divisions, World Trade Organization Secretariat has a training and a technical cooperation institution, a trade and information center and library. It's the unit which is specifically deals with trading services also. So The World Trade Organization pursues 4 areas with special emphasis in furtherance to its main objectives. What are the 4 areas is, it gives assist in developing countries and countries with economics in transition to market-based economics. Second one is, it specialized help for export promotion. Third one is, it has a global economic policy making. And fourth one is transparency in national trade policy. These are all the 4 areas where the special emphasis is put by the World Trade Organization. The dispute settlement mechanism. What the dispute settlement mechanism which was included in the World Trade Organization? Because we are seeing that the GATT doesn't have dispute settlement mechanism. The GATT has basically the consensual procedure only. But here, World Trade Organization exclusively mention the dispute settlement mechanism. The dispute settlement mechanism of the World Trade Organization is a unique feature. It has given the organization a great credibility and led to the effective enforcement of the rules-based global trade system while envisaging the World Trade Organization agreements. So the guiding mantra for the dispute settlement through this World Trade Organization is equitable, fast, effective, and mutually acceptable solutions. So the guiding mantra for this dispute settlement mechanism is equitable, fast, effective, and mutually acceptable solutions. So the main aim of the dispute settlement mechanism is to settle disputes with a view to adjust the trade measures between the member countries. So dispute arises when some measures are undertaken by a member of World Trade Organization is contested by the another member or some other members to be the violation of World Trade Organization agreement, or when a member is seen to be failing in honoring its commitment under the agreement. So when a dispute should be arisen. So in these 3 cases, the dispute should be arisen. That is, when one member is complaining against other member, or some other members, one member is complaining with some other members to be violation of World Trade Organization agreement, or even a member is seen to be failing in honoring its commitment under the World Trade Organization agreement. So for this, the apex body for the settlement of dispute is also there. That apex body is called Dispute Settlement Body, DSB. So it consists of all the members of the World Trade Organization. So it is in fact the General Council which sits as dispute settlement body to settle the dispute. So what is the procedure with regarding to dispute settlement body? When a dispute is received, the countries in conflict are first encouraged to talk to each other, consult each other, and resolve their differences themselves, taking help of mediators if necessary. If no resolution is reached within about 2 months, the dispute settlement body establishes a panel of experts to consider the case. Okay. So generally, the the country complaining against can block the setting up of a panel once, but in the second sitting, the DSB, the dispute settlement body, can go ahead with to create the panel unless there is a consensus happen. So a panel consists of 3 or 5 members from different countries. They are chosen generally in consultation with the contending parties. If the parties cannot agree on the panelists, the World Trade Organization Director General select them from the list of names already available with the World Trade Organization Secretariat. These panel, which was established by the dispute settlement body, this acted as a tribunal. This panel acted as a tribunal. So the appointment of panel is completed within about 45 days of the registration of the issue. So the panel may consult experts if necessary. So the panel, after the 45 days, this closely interact with the parties at each stage. It shows from the first draft of the parties so far as the facts and arguments part of the case are concerned, and seek their comments within 2 weeks. So the panel then submits an interim report, its findings and conclusions to the parties, giving them 1 week time to ask review. The review is completed within the 2 weeks, and a final report is submitted by the 2 sides within the 6 months of the formation of the panel. If the panel upholds the complainant, it recommended the measures to be taken to rectify the situation. The dispute settlement body considers the report, and if there is no consensus to reject it, the report becomes the dispute settlement body's ruling. So after this also, an appeal has to be generally disposed. So the appeal time period is within the 60 days, and in any case within the 90 days. That means it cannot be more than 90 days. So in generally within the 60 days you have to file appeal. Some other circumstantial evidence, if you provide that why the delay has happened, then you can go with 90 days, within the 90 days. The appellate body can modify or reserve the legal findings and conclusions of the panel. Next, World Trade Organization with new issues. What are the new issues deals with this World Trade Organization? So the new issues were, basically the World Trade Organization is currently grappling with the several complex issues. both old and new, as it navigates a changing global trade landscape. Some of the newer issues, some of the new issues, what there is. First one is reform of the dispute settlement mechanism, because the World Trade Organization dispute settlement body, which is crucial for resolving the trade disputes, has faced significant challenges, particularly due to the United States blocking the appointment of new judges to the appellate body. So you have to reform the dispute settlement mechanism. Number two, e-commerce and digital trade. So as digital trade goes rapidly, the World Trade Organization is facing pressure to update its rules to address e-commerce and the digital economy. The third one is the climate change and environmental sustainability. So due to increasing pressure to address the intersection of the trade and environmental issues, that led to discussions on how to align trade rules with global efforts to combat climate change. The fourth one is with regarding to developing countries and special and differential treatment, where there is a growing debate over the role of the developing countries within the World Trade Organization. So some developing countries, like the developed countries like the US, they argue that certain large emerging economies, for example China and India, they should not continue to receive the same special and differential treatment as smaller or less developed countries. So the reforming this criteria for this special and differential treatment is requires. The trade and gender. So the relationship between trade policies and gender equality is gaining attention. So the World Trade Organization is exploring the ways to integrate gender considerations into the trade agreements, due to they aim to promote the economic empowerment of women through these trade policies. So that may be due to this is the gender specific barriers and opportunities are there. So and the last new issue is inclusive and sustainable growth. So the World Trade Organization is facing so much pressure to ensure that trade contributes to more inclusive and substantial growth, addressing issues like income inequality. So the income inequality, this should be ensured for the benefits of the globalization. These are more broadly shared. So some argue for rethinking trade liberalization policies for the better consideration of the social and labor insights. So these are the new areas currently they are working on it. So regional economic grouping, trade and environment, trade and investment, competition policy, trade facilitation, electronic commerce, labor and trade, like that, trade and gender. So these are the new areas which want reforms. The next one is, next institution is TRIPS agreement. So the agreement, TRIPS is nothing but the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights. So this is one of the World Trade Organization agreement, GATS on TRIPS IP. So the TRIPS agreement is one of the most comprehensive international treaty that governs the intellectual property rights. It is one of the cornerstone of the World Trade Organization framework of the intellectual property rights also. So this was adopted in 1994 as part of the Uruguay round of the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. This TRIPS came into force on January 1st, 1995, when the World Trade Organization was officially established. So this TRIPS agreement, basically it is a detailed document. It comprises of total 73 articles. So these 73 articles were distributed over 7 parts. In the first part, they will deal with the okay, due to a small signal problem, the connection was interrupted. So the TRIPS agreement. The TRIPS agreement. So what are the objectives of the TRIPS agreement? So the objectives of the TRIPS agreement, number one is it harmonizes intellectual property laws globally. So by establishing a unified system of intellectual property protection, so they're setting the minimum standards for the intellectual property rights. The second one is they promote technological innovations due to this sudden vast growth of the technology. So they encourage innovations, and they also encourage the transfer of technology, especially with regarding to the intellectual property rights. The third one with regarding to balance of intellectual property protection and public policy. So, so these are the objectives. So some of the key provisions are there. First, it covers all IP rights. So basically the TRIPS agreement, broadly it considers the 7 intellectual property rights. The one is copyright and related rights. In the copyright related rights, it protects the literary and artistic and scientific works, along with the rights of the performance, rights of the producers, producers of the sound recordings and broadcasting organizations also. And the second one deals with the trademarks. So trademarks, it protects the distinctive signs that identify goods or services by ensuring that the companies can distinguish their products. The third one is the geographical indications. It protects the TRIPS protects the names that identify a product as originating from a specific region, which lends the product its quality or reputation. And the fourth one is industrial design. So it TRIPS protects the visual designs of objects that are not purely utilitarian. And it also identify the patents, but that is by granting exclusive rights to the inventors of for their innovation, including processes and products. That is process patent and product patent. The time duration for 20 years, and it consists of the trade secrets. So it protects the undisclosed information such as business practices or proprietary knowledge. It also discusses of the layout designs of integrated circuits. So this broadly discuss the types of the intellectual properties in the TRIPS agreement, and it also discuss the minimum standards. So the TRIPS agreement sets minimum standards for the protection and enforcement of each type of intellectual property, including the scope of the protection and the duration of the protection, as well as conditions under which intellectual property can be enforced. Next one is enforcement. So the TRIPS agreement, it mandates that member countries must provide effective mechanisms for enforcing intellectual property rights. So this basically includes civil procedure, criminal procedure, administrative procedures, how to counterfeit that, and how to solve that piracy. So these are all emphasis the broader measures to protect the importation of the goods that infringe intellectual property rights. The flexibilities for developing countries. The TRIPS agreement, it includes provisions that give developing and least developed countries flexibility in implementing the agreement. Some of these flexibilities are transition periods. For example, in the case of developing countries, they give some time. Developed countries, they have to immediately follow rules. Like that, they are giving flexibility. Rules are given. Transition periods are given. Uh, dispute settlement. So the TRIPS agreement is subject to the World Trade Organization dispute settlement mechanism. What the dispute settlement mechanism, which was inscribed through the World Trade Organization by the DBS Dispute Settlement Board. So like that, the same mechanism was followed by the TRIPS agreement also. So the disputes over the interpretation or application of the TRIPS provision can be resolved through the World Trade Organization established process. So by providing a structured method for resolving the disagreements between the member states. So in this TRIPS agreement, what are the key debates and controversies? So number one is access to medicine. One of the first and most contentious aspect of the TRIPS is in its impact on public health, particularly in developing countries. So the high cost of patented medicines has led to the criticism that TRIPS creates a barrier to access to life-saving drugs. So this led to the Doha Declaration on the TRIPS Agreement and the Public Health in 2001. It clarified TRIPS should not prevent countries from taking measures to protect public health, and it also allowed greater flexibility for compulsory licensing with regarding to that medicines also. And second one, with regarding to patenting of life forms. So the agreements requires the patents be available for any invention, but it leaves some room for exceptions, such as exclusion of plant and animals other than microorganisms. So this type of exemptions led to the ethical concerns, especially regarding the patenting of genetic material and biotechnology. And another concerning discussion is with regarding to the geographical indications. There are ongoing debates over the scope and enforcement of geographical indications. So, with some countries, particularly in the European Union, seeking stronger protection for products with specific geographical origins, while others argue for more flexible terms. And another discussion is with regarding the impact on traditional knowledge. So the TRIPS does not specifically protect traditional knowledge or folklore, leading to the concerns that indigenous knowledge, especially in developing countries, is not sufficiently protected from exploiting under the global intellectual property regime. So, what are the key developments through this TRIPS agreement? So, one is public health amendments. So, after the Doha Declaration in 2001, 2003, the decision allowed World Trade Organization members to export a generic version of patented medicines to countries without manufacturing capacity. So, this was formally incorporated into the TRIPS agreement in 2005. The second one is TRIPS waiver proposal. So, on the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, several countries that led by India and South Africa, they proposed a temporary waiver of certain TRIPS provision to allow to accept a wider production and distribution of vaccines, diagnostics, and treatments. So, this proposal has sparked intense debate with some countries supporting the waiver for public health reasons, while others also argue that it could discourage innovation and undermine intellectual properties. So the transitional periods and institutional arrangements, especially if you see the TRIPS agreement, in the TRIPS agreement, Article 1, it talks about the member states to give effect to the provisions of the agreement. That means while the member states are free to determine appropriate methods as per their legal system and practice to implement the agreement. So the member state of the World Trade Organization were given certain period of time. So the date on which the relevant transitional period expires for a member, so that is 1 year from the date of entry into the force of the World Trade Organization agreement, the developing countries were entitled to delay for a further period of 4 years. That means we are discussing how much duration, that flexibility in the accepting the principles of these TRIPS. If it is a member country, then all the members should have to generally accept within the 1 year. But in the case of developing countries, they also give some leverage that they extended to the 4 years. Till the 4 years, you can, within the 4 years, you can modify your laws and you can accept. So So this 4-year delay was also extended to those developing countries which were in the process of transformation of their market. So those countries only they give. And with regarding to the least developed countries, they were given 10 years period to consider their economic, financial, and administrative constraints. So, the TRIPS agreement also requires developed country members to provide on the request and on mutually agreed terms and conditions. So, this all setup of this TRIPS agreement, according to Article 1, so it gives to the some leverages to the developing countries and least developed countries. Some general provisions are there. Out of that, one is the TRIPS agreement places an obligation to its members to give effect to the agreement within the framework of their laws and practice. And second, the definition of intellectual property is a descriptive one, which would include all categories of intellectual property. That is what we are discussing in the copyright, trademark, patents, geographical indications, industrial designs, layout designs, and integrated circuits. Third one is the TRIPS requires members to accord treatment to the nations of the other members. That is the most favored nation treatment. Those are this. So these are the some of the provisions of the TRIPS agreement. So what is the significance of the TRIPS agreement? So the significance of the TRIPS agreement is it makes global harmonization of the intellectual property rights. So TRIPS agreement plays a crucial role in creating a more predictable and uniform system of intellectual property protection across the world to make it easier for business and innovations to operate globally. And um, it also signifies that the economic impact, the TRIPS agreement is seen as a vital for fostering the innovation and creativity by protecting the rights of creators, innovators, inventors, and promoting the international trade and investment also. But the implementation and enforcement can disproportionately affect the developing countries. And the third significance is regarding to the it balancing the intellectual property and public interest. So the TRIPS agreement tries to strike a balance between protecting the rights of intellectual property holders and ensuring that the intellectual property does not hinder important public interests such as health, education, and access to knowledge. So, the TRIPS agreement is a key instrument in global trade. So, that establishes rules for the protection and enforcement of intellectual property. So, while it has helped harmonizing global intellectual property standards and foster innovations, it also faces significant criticism, particularly regarding access to medicine, public health concerns, and in the developing countries where it faces some problem, significant criticism it is facing. So with this, we are broadly discussed about the World Trade Organization and the establishment of World Trade Organization, how the historically they are started, and along with that TRIPS agreement we are discussed. So in the tomorrow's class, we will discuss the enforcement of this international this intellectual properties in international level. Already we had discussed that in that previous classes also, the enforcement of intellectual property rights, but here exclusively discuss what the institutions were there to enforce with regarding to particularly the police, the Interpol, the role of customs in the in the um, enforcement. At the same time, what is the dispute settlement mechanism in the international level also. So we last time we saw that civil, criminal, and arbitrational proceedings along with the civil, criminal, and administration procedures along with the arbitration proceedings with the while dealing the disputes. So same also how the settlement of disputes and what is the trend of the settlement of disputes in the international level also we will see. And along with that, there is a last topic which deals with patent in new areas, especially uh, new areas is nothing but the biotechnology. Patent in new areas. So patent it exclusively deals with the biotechnology, genetic resources, and computer software. So how it is. What is the new areas, new dimensions we will deal with tomorrow class. So yesterday someone asked that what is the compulsory licensing in the Paris Convention. So basically the Paris Convention has some provisions in that one of the article 5.8 talks about the importation and compulsory license. That means in the case of importation, so one, if a member country of the Paris Convention uh, take of one particular product of that country, they may go other country, and in other country also they can manufacture. That is importation. With regarding to compulsory license, that means that is not mentioned anything about there, but their idea is you have to take a license of the product what you invented. So that is the concept was there in the Paris Convention. That means the Paris Convention makes that it is a mandatory for the every inventor to apply or to take the compulsory license from any member country of that Paris Convention. So what it gives is it will gives to the protection, legal protection. So that is the idea of the compulsory licensing. So thank you for today's class.